One of the eternal truths about Donald Trump seems to be his belief that he can speak things into reality. If he said something is true, then he is almost trying to will it to be true. He possibly even believes himself that it is true. So abnormal is his personality. And as we've touched on many times, but I feel we've never really nailed it down. I'm not sure we ever will. I'm not sure it is nailable. But we have spoken many times about the media's inability, myself included, to properly chronicle something as bonkers as this. What choice do you have if the President of the United States of America announces that he has successfully negotiated a ceasefire? What choice do you have as a newscaster, as a news editor? As a newspaper editor, as any sort of commentator or journalist? The President of the United States of America has announced a negotiated ceasefire between two parties that were previously launching missiles at each other so frequently that it sometimes appeared as if it was going out of fashion. What choice do you have? I mean, they've got a little bit better, but the furthest they go towards, I'll believe it when I see it, is saying Donald Trump says he has negotiated a ceasefire. But he's still the President of the United States of America. So him, simply by dint of saying something, it becomes news, whether it's true or not. And you marry that. I never stop being fascinated by this, by the psychology behind it. I know it's not nearly as important as the people who have died and the people who will die and suffer and be dispossessed and lose their homes. But in terms of trying to unravel what the heck is going on, you have to start at first base, don't you? And first base is this marriage between a complete abandonment of objective reality, objective truth, and the failure or the inability of the traditional means of chronicling our shared reality to keep up with the madness. It's so simple. It's like sabotage or arson. It's not a sophisticated game of 4D chess. It's just, if I say things that aren't true loud enough and long enough, they kind of become true. Insofar as my base will believe them, they'll believe anything I say, and the media has to report it. Even if, I mean, what did you think this morning? What do you do, by the way? What's the first thing you do in terms of the news? I'm increasingly aware of people who are moving away from the news. I'm increasingly aware of people who are limiting their diet, leavening their diet of information. And I do actually understand why. I know to endorse the idea would make me a turkey voting for Christmas. But if you're still in the business of checking up on what is going on in the world, then what do you do first? So I've got on my phone, I've got the BBC, the New York Times. In fact, I'll tell you, I'll double check. I've got the LBC app, the BBC app, the Apple, what's it called? Aggregator, the one that gives you glimpses of everything. I've got the Financial Times, the New York Times, and the Times. So particularly with the Apple aggregator, you get a little bit of everything there. So I get the Guardian, the Telegraph, the Standard, Sky News, the Manchester Evening News at the top of my feed. So I look at that and more or less identical headlines, which is quite rare these days. More or less identical headlines saying essentially ceasefire agreed. And what's your first thought? Your first thought, I hope, is I hope so. Your first thought is, we don't want carnage. Your second thought is, I don't think this fits the facts as they are available. You know, I don't think that Benjamin Netanyahu is likely to abide by the terms of any ceasefire any more than he is to abide by, or was to abide by, the terms of the last ceasefire that he breached with regard to Gaza. Iran don't look to me like an administration that's ready to roll over and look a little bit pliant in the face of American importuning. And of course, the difficulty of getting a clear line on anything couldn't be more obvious this morning when I tell you that Israel says Iran has violated the ceasefire already, and Iran says, oh no, we haven't. What does Donald Trump say in that space? Getting ready to do a lap of honour at The Hague today at the NATO meeting. Well, what does he do now? Israel say that the ceasefire has been breached, lasted a matter of hours. Iran says it wasn't us. Benjamin Netanyahu, as we have established in the past and very recently, needs war. It's the only thing essentially that's going to keep him out of jail. So who do you believe? Who the heck do you believe? Donald Trump lies like the rest of us breathe. Benjamin Netanyahu needs war to stay out of jail but can never say so. And the theocratic autocracy, or can you be a theocratic autocracy? Anyway, the theocracy in Tehran abides by or plays by rules that the rest of the world can barely understand, let alone agree with. So who do you actually believe? Who do you trust? Who do you think is telling the truth in the current space? Donald Trump says there's a ceasefire. Israel says there isn't. Iran says, well, if there isn't, it's not our fault because we haven't fired the missiles that you say that we fired. Good Lord. That happens some mornings, doesn't it, when we sit down together, get to sort of 8, 9, 10 minutes past and suddenly appreciate for the first time the full scale of the problem that's sitting in front of us. So the three major players in this conflagration that some people have posited as a precursor to World War III, I personally think that's hyperbole. But you have moments, don't you, of wondering just how big the stakes may prove to be. Nadine Dorries, remember her, has written an article this morning about how a relative has built a nuclear bunker that she intends to climb into in the event of a 4-minute warning being sounded. And she gets paid by the Daily Mail for that sort of stuff. But the three major players in this potentially apocalyptic conflagration, I don't personally think it is, but some cleverer people than me have at least posited the notion, are all untrustworthy. They're all known liars. Not even a Donald Rumsfeld pack. They're not unknown knowns or they're known liars. They lie and they lie and they lie again. Hey, who's the least? We probably don't follow events in Iran enough to know just how egregious their lies are, but we know enough about the torture and the oppression and the persecution and the criminalisation of all forms of dissent. It's the kind of country where if you launch a peaceful protest against the government, even if it involves a little bit of criminal damage, you could probably end up being jailed as a terrorist. Oh no, sorry, that's the United Kingdom. And it's to the United Kingdom that we turn first this morning. I don't know what the heck Keir Starmer should be doing. I want to run you through some headlines, if I may, because I think they highlight the absolute difficulty that the Prime Minister faces at the moment. And we've got another little echo of that observation I made yesterday about this mad compunction to have pungent opinions. Got to have a strong opinion about whether America was right or wrong to bomb Iran. Well, I need to know first what the intelligence was. Because without intelligence, they're almost certainly in breach of international law. And most informed people in that field either agree that international law has been breached or sort of fudge around the question of whether or not international law was too strict in the first place. How can you possibly have a strong opinion on that? Because it's your job. You've got to have a strong opinion. Are you for or against? Are you with me or without me? And you sort of see the same in the way that Keir Starmer has been talked about. And this, by any measure, this is him speaking to Channel 4 News on June the 17th, so a week ago to the day. This, by any measure, is unfortunate.
I sat next to the President for the 2-hour discussion we had on the Middle East when we discussed the situation in the round. Absolutely clear that everyone was agreed that the Iranian nuclear program cannot be tolerated, that we must de-escalate.
But he's escalated it the moment he's walked out the door. He started talking about how Tehran needs to be evacuated. Enormous kit is moved to the region. He's not on the same page, is he?
As I say, Gary sat for 2 hours yesterday, had that discussion. I was sat right next to the President. Actually, we went through the statement line by line, so there's no disputing that that is the shared statement of intent by the G7.
And when he said that, it was true. I think the most compelling explanation for why Trump has done what he's done came in the New York Times yesterday when highly placed sources explained that he'd been watching Fox News and was jealous of all the praise that Benjamin Netanyahu was getting for attacking Iran and thought to himself, I want a piece of that. So Starmer was almost certainly telling the truth. Well, he was telling the truth about the situation that he found himself in. 1 week later, he looks absolutely ridiculous. It was Gary Gibbon asking the questions and expressing a fair degree of incredulity, but obviously Starmer was telling the truth about the meeting that he'd had. Open The Guardian today and you will see the indomitable Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe complaining with much justification that Keir Starmer has not condemned the American attacks upon Iran for the obvious illegality, for the obvious breach of international law that they involve. So he's getting grief from Nazanin for that. She also describes the attack on a prison in which I think she was held as being a publicity stunt, an Israeli publicity stunt, and describes how she is terrified for the inmates of Evin prison. Benjamin Netanyahu doing things for the domestic audience there, not for the benefit of any imprisoned Iranian dissidents. So he's getting it in the neck. Keir Starmer's getting it in the neck from one side for not supporting the attacks. Front page of the Daily Mail. So whose side are you on, Sir Keir? Getting it in the neck from the left, or at least from the rather more informed Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe for not condemning the attacks for their illegality. Getting it, I don't know, who else? Let me have a look at my inbox. Let me see who else is slagging him off and indeed what for. I may find something in a moment. But what do you mean, whose side are you on, Sir Keir? You're on the side of international law, surely. He is, after all, a lawyer. And international law appears to have been breached, but he can't say that because it would alienate his ally Donald Trump. I don't know that I can answer the question that I'm about to ask you, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Well, how do we do this? Do I say, what would you do if you were Keir Starmer? Does that actually make it easier to answer than if I simply say, what do you want Keir Starmer to do, or what do you think Keir Starmer should do? I presume the answer to the last two questions is the same. What do you want him to do? What do you think he should do? But what would you do? What can he do? I don't think, and I don't like the sort of denigration of the UK status. We're not the power we were before Suez or before the Second World War. Obviously we're not, and, for good or for ill. But equally, we are still punching way, way, way above our weight on the international stage. And Keir Starmer has probably been more successful in terms of international diplomacy than he has on the domestic stage, certainly in terms of getting the message across, getting the story across. So what he has been doing is attempting to bring a sort of lawyer's rationale to an utterly irrational situation where Netanyahu and Trump are calling almost all the shots. What on earth should he be doing? 0345 606 0973. The third piece, the third point on the triangle would be in Rupert Murdoch's Times this morning, where an unbylined analysis asks, how did Starmer get it so wrong on Trump and Iran? So you get a kicking from that side, a kicking from the other side, a kicking from sides you didn't even know existed. David Lammy, emerged from a meeting with Donald Trump, or with Marco Rubio, I think yesterday, I beg your pardon, on Thursday of last week, convinced that Trump genuinely wants a deal. And then the next thing you know, he's dropping enormous bombs, the biggest bombs in the world. For once, Trump's hyperbole actually fits the facts at about shortly after 5 a.m. UK time on Saturday. With the UK government for most of that day completely unaware of what was happening. So when Donald Trump is a liar, Benjamin Netanyahu's motivation is self-preservation and cynicism at all costs, and Iran is run by a medieval theocracy, what should Keir Starmer be doing? What can Keir Starmer do? What would you like him to do? I can list all the things he's doing wrong, but what would being right look like? And I will take any answer you've got on this. Obviously, there's going to be two answers to this question that are diametrically opposed to each other, but that in many ways is the point. I could take a call from one person saying Keir Starmer should do this, and another call from another equally intelligent, equally informed and thoughtful person saying Keir Starmer should be doing that. And those two things will be utterly unsustainable in parallel. There's no earthly way he could do both things at the same time, which is a rare moment for a politician. The Daily Mail could not make it clearer that it doesn't like thinking beyond the what colour is your scarf, whose side are you on, why aren't you in favour, how can you do... I mean, it's so bone-numb, it's so mind-numbingly thick, this approach to international diplomacy. We're talking about nuclear facilities. Whose side are you on, Sir Keir? Are you on the side of the nuclear power that still to this day officially denies that it's a nuclear power? Or are you on the side of the country that's not a nuclear power? You must pick a side, and it's just been bombed because of claims that it may be about to become a nuclear power, but we've been hearing the same claim since 1992, from the power that is actually nuclear, from the state that is a nuclear power but isn't a signatory to any international treaties in order to persist in the, what do they call it, the deliberate opacity regarding its own nuclear capabilities. So whose side are you on? I thump desk. Whose side are you on? Goodness me, it's so stupid. It's so dangerous and it's so normal. It's so normal. And Keir Starmer, for good or for ill, doesn't play that game. I got Priti Patel offering up her views on this without anybody mentioning that she got fired by Theresa May for conducting secret meetings with the Israeli regime. Who wouldn't want to hear her impartial, unbiased and objective views on a matter that the Israeli regime is up to its neck in? Who could possibly be a more fair commenter than a woman sacked from the British cabinet for having secret meetings with the Israeli administration? Extraordinary. But that's Brexit Britain. I haven't even mentioned Daniel Hannan Day yet. Happy Daniel Hannan Day. We will be marking it properly, with all the pomp and circumstance and tradition that you would expect. 9 years to the day since the world's wrongest man offered up his vision of what Brexit would look like on June the 24th, 2025. But before all of that, when I arrived at work this morning, there was a ceasefire. When I prepared to record a brief introduction to the programme at about 9:30, there was not. The ceasefire was over. You scratch the surface of that situation and you find that the country claiming the ceasefire is over is Israel, because they say Iran has fired missiles. We had some anecdotal evidence in our inbox that people in Israel were in shelters and were witnessing missiles being fired, but Iran say they are not. Keir Starmer's job is to somehow plot a diplomatic course through this mess, and I, for one, have no idea what it would look like.